everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. Here I am with a video about my childhood favorites in regards to historical fiction. I loved historical fiction as a child. I have not read much of it lately in my life, but I do really enjoy it. And I also have other genres that I will be touching on in another video or a couple more videos. So we're going to start off with my historical fiction favorites. I still own several of them, and I have been collecting some of them as I can as an adult since I didn't have them from when I was a child. So the first book that I want to talk about was my favorite childhood books. I haven't read it in years and I probably should, but that's Sister to the Wolf by Maxine Trottier. This one follows a girl named Cecile who, her and her father her mother's not in the picture, her mother died, and so her and her father go past the slave auction and see this man, Lucero, for sale. He is First Nations and he is going to be sold to someone who's supposedly going to be cruel to him. So they buy him and then they free him, but he swears his loyalty to them and to protect them. And so he follows them around in New France when it's very tumultuous with this relationship between the French Canadians and the First Nations and all of the different turmoil that's happening there. So it follows in a very interesting path, and it really dissects the way, in a middle grade fashion, it really dissects the different ways that people were treated back then and what was going on politically without being too political of a book. I really loved it, and it's just a great story about this group of people, like this three-person group who are traveling around and trying to figure things out, and a romance that happens between Cecile and Lucero. My next historical fiction book that I absolutely loved growing up, I read it for my stuff when I was like 13, my homeschool stuff, and that was The Ramseys Scallop by Francis Temples. Francis Temples. So this follows two teenagers in 1299 when they are engaged, they're betrothed, and the 14-year-old Eleanor does not want to get married. She feels like she's too young and they don't know each other at all. He just came back, I believe, from war. It's been a long time since I've read this. And so they go on this journey together and they slowly fall in love, but it's a lot about the times then, the 19th century to early 14th century, and how that impacted their status as gender and the different things that happened with them. I don't remember exactly what the Ramseys Scallop had to do with it, but I think they were set on a kind of quest to go get something. So I really loved this, and it was so short and easy to read, and I just kept it all these years. So the next book that I absolutely loved growing up was, or book series I guess I should say, is the Girls of Many Lands series. This follows girls all over the world, but mostly set in Asia, I believe, if I remember correctly, and and Africa as well, where it just follows them. I remember one, and I believe it's this one, but I can't remember if it is, where a girl thought she had gone to be not to be a burden to her parents anymore, and she went to be a bride, but in actuality she was being forced to be a slave in the ruler's palace kind of thing. I think it might have been the India book though, actually. So this one takes place in Turkey. This one's called Layla the Black Tulip, and I really loved them. It gave me an insight into someone else's life, especially girls throughout history. This one takes place in 1700, so it was all over history, and it was really interesting to read about and sad sometimes, and made me grateful for the freedom that I had as being born in the 1990s. Another book that I really remember loving, and I haven't read for so long, is Catherine Called Birdie by Karen Cushman. And this one follows a girl named Catherine in the year 1290 when she is trying to avoid any suitor. I believe she's 14 years old, maybe 15, and she is trying to get her way out of marriage as she's too young, she feels like. And so she's trying to avoid marriage, and her father basically is trying to force this marriage on her. It's very well done, and I thought it was, if I remember correctly, I loved how these characters were just so interesting to me, and how she was just standing up to not be married. It gets to a point where her father's trying to force her into marriage, and it's a really good one. I really loved it, and it's a very small one. I think I've owned this one since I originally had it, actually. The next one is a series that I read so much more than just this, but I only have these three right now, and that's the Royal Diaries. So these follow princesses and queens throughout history. I remember reading about King Kristen, and I remember reading about Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth I, Anastasia from Russia, the Tsar's daughter. These ones in particular are Isabel, the Jewel of Castile, Mary Queen of Scots, the Queen Without a Country is what the subtitle is, and Eleanor, Jewel of Aquitaine. So Eleanor of Aquitaine. So these are three that I own. I have read so many, Cleopatra, and Marie Antoinette. They're so good. And I love that in all of these books, so you have the section is told in journal entry as if she's talking. Then you have this section. One second. So then after all of the fictionalized life stuff, you have a family tree of the actual queen and what she, experienced. If there are pictures, there's pictures along with a true family history of what happened to each person. So this is something that I've always enjoyed as a true in some ways, but fictionalized history. It really taught me about different people all over the world. I also remember reading one about the Incas, and I think I read one about South America, but I can't remember the title of it. So the last historical fiction series that I want to talk to you about is one that I absolutely adored growing up. I've talked about in a few videos, and that's Dear Canada or Dear America. I loved these books so much growing up. They gave me insight into people who were in Canada at different times in history. This one follows 1897, where orphans were being sent around. This one follows 1666, where women were being sent from France to New France to become brides at very young ages sometimes. This one is also set in New France. Both the New France books are by Maxine Trottier, so she makes a highlight 3 times in this video. And so this one takes place in 1759 about New France as well. Now, those are all just so, there's some about, what was there? There's the Prairie movement, there's the Vancouver with the Chinese building the railroad tracks and all these different things. There's so many of them, the Loyalists, all through history and Canadian history. Loved them. They taught me so much about this time area. And just like Royal Diaries, they showed real events or talk about real events that happened then, even though these people aren't real. And then I have my Dear America. So Dear America had tons of these as well. I rarely saw them though, as Canada, we didn't sell them very well. So this one follows a Jew who is in the States or manages to get to the States from Austria to New York. And this one takes place obviously in wartime, World War II. So this is something where I learned about history in unique perspectives, and most of them were girls. They did have a boys series. I think My Name is Canada was the boys series like this. And I just love them. These are journal entries at least, as are the Royal Diaries. So these are the books that I loved reading as a child that were historical fiction. They were books that filled me with wonder, filled me with creativity about the past, and things that really inspired me to think about different perspectives or different situations in the world. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these or what are your favorite historical fiction middle grade books, because I am always up for new historical fiction, especially middle grade, because they're often so much fun. And please let me know down below if you are participating in middle grade March and what you'll be reading. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye for now.